is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Season 1, Episode 15. Josh has no idea where I am. In this episode, Rebecca decides to run away from her life because she has basically a breakdown about nobody in her life loving her. And this episode, she is shown just how wrong she really is about that. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very, very much to Emery for commissioning this episode. What's up, Emery? They have commissioned a few of this show, and I am just delighted about it. This episode was the culmination of a lot of things that I have been hoping for in terms of Rebecca coming to terms with... It's not even about the fact that she doesn't feel that anybody loves her, because while if I had really thought through where she's coming from, I think I would have realized that was at the root of things. It's more about her, for me anyway, and feel free to disagree with this, but it's more about her deciding that things are a way and kind of blindly forging ahead with this assumption. And this is something that we do in life, right? Human beings, that's part of psychology, is that we decide that a certain reality is true for us, and then we continue living our lives creating that reality around ourselves because we believe it already. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so, Rebecca becoming interested in men who are not available or who are not particularly interested in her, it makes sense that she feels that she isn't lovable and that is what she would pursue in order to fulfill that particular point of view, to make it true. And I found this episode to be really kind of touching in a lot of ways, but also, of course, very frustrating, because we're going to have to talk about Paula. We're going to have to. It's getting to the point. I'll get there. So, we start off the episode with her on the plane and us thinking that she has decided to go ahead with this therapy. But the thing is that she actually agreed to do the therapy for 5 hours, took some sleeping pills, and then followed it up with a Bloody Mary and passed the fuck out. So this is not real therapy. This is a dream ghost, as the number goes. So what this therapist is a manifestation. It's in the lyrics, it's specifically we don't know if it's a hallucination or if I'm actually magical, but we're going to leave it kind of vague because it's more interesting that way. And, you have to, because her memory of being forced to leave her father's house, she can't know about the fact that her father didn't actually want her there. This isn't, her memory reminding her of a thing that she forgot. This is a part of a conversation that did not involve her, that she was not there for, that she didn't see or hear. So it has to be magic, because how else, Same thing with her being able to see all of her friends and Daryl in her living room and being able to pick up Greg's phone. She can't actually do that. But for the sake of the show, we're going with it. And I have no doubt that whatever wound up happening in her dream was what was going on for real, that we're going to pretend that this is all straight up magic and that she is able to travel to places and see things that otherwise she would not be able to. there's some really heartbreaking stuff happening. So this first thing with the dream ghost is pretty fun because she asks Rebecca, I never actually got the full story from you on why you even came to West Covina. And we get the usual opening number, and she says something like, you keep on like saying that that's not why, but you then just said that you definitely moved here for Josh. And Rebecca's like, oh yeah, I'm going to need to update that song. So I would love to see if that actually happens, if that totally gets turned around, and they change the opening number. Part of me would miss it, and part of me would also really enjoy it being like a little different. And it's really like frustrating that Rebecca, for the sake of the show, we need there to be a dream ghost instead of a regular therapist, right? What she figures out could not have been figured out in a regular therapy session. Never, like even a 5-hour therapy session, she couldn't. So we need her to be transported around in a sort of It's a Wonderful Life style for her to reach the conclusions that she does and to see the things that she has not been privy to. But the knowledge that Rebecca sat down, agreed to a therapy session, and then took sleeping pills and down to Bloody Mary is endlessly frustrating to me. Girl, what are you doing? You knew you were going to fall asleep and you did that. Come on. But it's fine. So I'm going to quickly touch base with Paula because she has decided to try and help out Rebecca while she's gone. And she goes and buys Rebecca's couch back. I don't know how she knew who bought it from her or what, but she is bringing it into Rebecca's apartment with Lady Who Never Speaks, whose name I never remember. And it's like the middle of the workday and she's supposed to turn around and go home or go back to work. But she decides to take the rest of the day as a personal day. And part of that is because when she is in Rebecca's apartment, she is astonished at how quiet it is and how lovely a day by herself she could have if she were, if she were to stay here just for a little while, just while Rebecca is gone. And this was something that I tried to do a little bit for Rashawn when she came to visit. Rashawn shares a 1-bedroom with her husband. Like, they cannot get away from each other. And he also works from home. So any time that she is home, he is also home, almost every time. She is somebody who thrives on alone time, though. She is the kind of person that needs that. So you can see that her living situation, but her personality together do not translate to an excellent mental health situation. So when she came to visit me, she had Owen's office that she was staying in, but also I had some patio chairs outside, and she would go out and smoke, and I would just leave her alone. And she would sit for like an hour and a half with the cigarette and her phone. And, there were some times where I was like, man, she has been out there for a long time. But I just then would watch a show for the podcast, or I would read or do cooking or whatever. And every time she would come back in and just be like, it is so nice to just be able to sit and have some time by myself. And Paula has fucking children, She doesn't even have the kind of personality that Rashawn has, I don't feel, where she desperately needs time alone consistently to be at a good equilibrium. But anybody needs time alone sometimes, even somebody who's like a huge extrovert like me, And I really love this detail, this whole thing going on this episode with her, like lighting candles and having a magazine and wearing a robe and the whole thing just being really like a spa day for her. It sort of plays into what I'm going to talk about a little bit later in a different way that I think is a little less healthy, but we'll talk about that. So Rebecca is talking to her therapy ghost, and she gets this amazing Dream Girls number, which I can't tell you how long it took for me to realize that they were doing a Dreamgirls number, I am embarrassed at the fact that I didn't know that's what it was until practically the sequence came out. Like, they are singing, "We're the Dream Ghosts." It sounds like Dreamgirls, Natasha. Where is your head at that you didn't... What? But there I am. So they are faced with this amazing little, what's it called? Like screen of options for memory selections. Childhood trauma, failures, rejection, puberty, men/loneliness, women/jealousy. Guys, this is it. I don't want to touch any of those buttons. Thank you very, very much. Erica Peters says, who else had completely forgotten about Ricki Lake until she appeared in that number? I'm sorry. What? That was Ricki Lake? Okay. Oh, okay. Wait a second. Oh my God. I am... What? Oh my God, Erica. I would never, ever have put that together at all. What? She says, and Amber Riley. I do not know who that is. Who's Amber Riley? I'm looking them up. Oh my God, I had no idea that was Ricki Lake. Oh yeah, she's been on Glee, right? Okay, yeah. Huh. Well, good for her. I didn't know Ricki Lake sang. Amber Riley makes sense. She's on a show about singing. But Ricki Lake, that's a surprise. That is hilarious. Wow. Okay, so they go into this memory of Rebecca coming to visit her father. And guys, this is fucking brutal. Oh my God. Erica says Ricki Lake was in Hairspray. I never saw that. I didn't know she was in that. That's fun. Well, good for her. I love that she's still doing stuff. Guys, how many of you have had, and you know, obviously Rebecca's in a particular position here where she's getting information that's new that she didn't have. So it's different for her. But how many of you have childhood memories that you look back on as an adult and suddenly it all becomes clear what was really going on and you feel like a fucking idiot? Or at least, if not like a fucking idiot, you, like, your entire context for something that you have always believed changes around in a second because you realize you had it all wrong. I have had this happen a few times in my life where I look back and, you know, it's funny. I can come across as somebody who has like sort of unfailing confidence sometimes, or who is just, you know, willing to take risks. And I have not always been this way. And I am still a very cautious person in my soul. But most of the memories that I have that I recontextualize as an adult are moments of me thinking that somebody was discouraging me or didn't believe in me. And I look back and realize that it was their own issue cropping up and that it kind of had nothing to do with me, or that there was something that like I took as sort of insulting. And I realized that they meant it for me to take it as a compliment. But as a child, I didn't really understand some of like the verbiage that they were using or the intent behind certain things. And so I was really hurt by things that now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, they were being nice. And I like didn't get it. On the other hand, there is stuff that I kind of thought somebody was being nice. And I look back and realize, oh, that's not what that was at all, actually. Wow. And it is a really startling moment when that happens, especially with memories that are like this is for Rebecca, where it's like a formative moment for you and your childhood, the direction that your life went, and how you see a significant person in your life. So Rebecca uses all of her I think she says she got like bat mitzvah money that she saved, and she used all of it to buy this plane ticket and leave without like telling her mother or asking or anything, and come to visit her dad. And like, let's all take a step back and appreciate that she's supposed to be like 13 here, 12. And she has managed to buy a plane ticket and find like transportation to her father's house, which it's not like it's an impossible thing for somebody that age to do, but it's pretty ballsy. Like, she's obviously a really smart kid, and she is really excited to see her dad. And what she says later is, I always knew my dad was an abandoning piece of shit, but I didn't know that he was like this. I thought that I could at least blame my mother for most of this. And that's what it comes down to for us a lot. When we're children, there is a really black and white understanding of the world. And we want people to be at fault and to blame for things that go wrong. And when I was a kid, it was very much this way. You know, my father was the person that I blamed. And to be fair, he was kind of an abusive guy. Like, he was not physically abusive, but he was incredibly controlling and just mentally like wore my mother down in a lot of ways. So it's understandable why I felt that way. However, when I look at what was going on, my mother did have a lot of choices that she could have made that she didn't. And she pretended she didn't have those choices at all. And she did, and she could have, but she chose not to do things because she was afraid. And it's taken a long time for me to understand that being afraid is a reason not to do something. It's like a very valid reason, but it also doesn't excuse that you decided to stick with like a shitty situation and also keep your child in a shitty situation. We are all making choices all the time, even when we act like we have no choice. And the fact that she wants to blame her mother for her dad leaving makes total sense. You know, it really, really does. So the fact that she saw this the way that she did, it's not just, oh, she had a child's understanding of what was happening. It's also literally her mother made sure that she didn't know the truth because she was protecting Rebecca from the realization that her father was actual trash. And God, that is like quite a sacrifice for her mother to have made. Like, I'm getting verklempt. But is it verklempt? Is it verklempt? Whatever. Her mother was willing to be hated by her in exchange for Rebecca not knowing that her own father did not care about her, did not love her, really, when it comes down to it. That is something that I don't know I would be willing to do. Shouldering that kind of blame for the rest of their lives? She never intended Rebecca to know about this. You know, Rebecca finds out about this via magic, you know, like this is not something that she was like, oh, I'm planning to reveal all the truth later when she's old enough to understand. It's clear if Rebecca's at the age she is now and she still doesn't know the truth, her mom was just going to let her think that she was responsible for separating her from her own father. That's a kind of love and protectiveness that you have to set aside your entire ego for. And that's huge, you know? And I know that, and it's kind of, it's funny, sad, but I was watching this episode with Owen, and when her therapist says, somebody did love you, and meanwhile it's her mother's face on the screen at this point, Rebecca says, I'm sorry. Your message here is that my mother loved me? A mother's love is bare minimum. Even serial killers have mothers who love them. I really felt terrible because Owen, sitting next to me, has a mother who maybe doesn't love him. And he kind of snorted in response to that line because it's a bit of a defense mechanism to treat it like it's a joke. But his parents straight up abandoned him and lived blocks away from where he was raised from age, I think like 8, by his grandparents, and never came to see him. They never came to talk with him, find out how he was doing. They did not care at all. His sister was adopted by his aunt and uncle because his parents had children that they could not and would not care for. So as much as we try and like sort of dismiss a mother's love as being that significant because everybody gets that, no, they don't. They don't. And I feel like it's a really unfortunate thing that this show did with that line, because it's so typical to show a mother who loves her kid, but a father who's garbage. And don't get me wrong, I'm going to just say it. I think the majority of fathers are garbage. I'm not even trying to say some fathers are garbage. I think most fathers are trash. But we love to pretend that women don't also abandon their kids. Like, that happens. And they can abandon them without ever literally doing it. They can simply check out and not participate in anything that's important to their kid. They can be very discouraging or make it clear over and over that they didn't want to have this kid, that, you know, you were in an accident and ruined my life, essentially. Do you know how expensive it's been to raise you? Do you know how like much I've given up and sacrificed so that you are here and you don't even like, you know, there's a million ways in which we see the manifestation of mothers not loving their kids. And it is a lot more common nowadays for people to be more honest about it, because it's been hugely taboo for any woman to really just come out and say, I don't know if I love my kids. It's been unthinkable. But in the age of the internet, there's a lot more ability for folks to share thoughts like this anonymously. And you see this sort of thing happening. Women who didn't want to have their kids sort of forced into it, or they have their kid and then their like significant other leaves them and they're left alone, but with like this enormous responsibility, and they resent it. And like there's just this sort of attitude that a mother's love is a given. And it's certainly not having a mother's love seems to be the minority of situations, but I feel like treating it as a given is really hurtful to those for whom it wasn't a given. It makes you feel like there's even more wrong with you than you thought, when other people are so quick to be like, well, of course their mother loves them and yours doesn't. How much of a freak does that make you feel like? And like, I am so like constantly impressed and astonished at how well Owen has turned out, considering that his parents just like fucking like practically left him to die. Like, that was what was low-key happening. His sister was like, they didn't take her away until she was so unwell she could have died in literal days, because she was not being fed or changed or anything. And Owen is sitting next to me hearing this line that implies that like even a serial killer's mother loves them. So what the fuck is your problem? And I know that's not what's being said, but that's what I heard. And I'm not even Owen, you know? So I just like that kind of fucking got to me a little bit. That bummed me out. And I wish that there was I understand totally where Rebecca is coming from when she says that. And that a lot of us would probably react the same way. If we did have a mother that loves us and somebody tries to be like, well, your mother loves you when you're frustrated about romantic issues. Of course you're going to react like, fuck you, my mother. Like, of course. So what? That's not what we're here for. And you know that's not what I'm talking about. So like, I do get the context of it and what she was saying. But oof, it just really fucking cut me like a knife to hear her say that with somebody whose mother abandoned them sitting next to me. So I just really wanted to like address that. So Rebecca's father, as it turns out, he like, it's really clear from the moment she gets there that he is not particularly happy to see her. Like, she says something like, aren't you happy to see me? And he has to backpedal and be like, no, of course I am. But like, yeah, we all know, no, he is not. And it's very easy to see. And what kills me is like in the morning, she's making pancakes. Like, this is not a kid who drops in on her dad, throws her toys around, takes over the television, leaves a mess behind her, and generally acts like your average kid who is a disaster and therefore adds a huge amount of work to her stay. Even if she were that kind of kid, oh well, she's your child, suck it up. But she's not. She is making every effort to be a good guest, to care for her father and show her affection by cleaning up after herself and making meals for him. Everything about how she's handling this is to make it as little little trouble for him as possible. Which, holy shit, do I relate to that. I always tried to make myself as small as I could and as little trouble as I could. I didn't want anybody to be put out having to look after me or raise me or anything. And even when I needed things, I would sort of keep my mouth shut about a lot of it because I just didn't want to be too needy. And I knew that we didn't have very much money. I was very aware from a child of the fact that we couldn't afford a lot of things. So I wasn't somebody who complained that I didn't get X, Y, and Z on Christmas. Like, when a bunch of my friends were getting video game consoles and things like that, even though I would have liked to have some of that stuff, I just knew, well, that's just not in the cards for me. And I'm not going to make them feel bad by bringing it up. And Rebecca is clearly that type of kid. She already has some guilt, you know? And yet, even so, it turns out that he called her mother to come and get her. And it's tragic because Rebecca sees this as her mother punishing her for running away and her mother attempting to keep her away from her father because she has bitterness towards her husband and does not like that Rebecca is close to a man that she hates, that she feels betrayed them. Now, it would kind of be understandable if she did feel that way, but it's clear Rebecca's mom really thinks it's important for Rebecca to have a relationship with her own father, and he is the one that is not interested. He says something about how he wasn't prepared, and she very rightfully is like, prepared for what? She's your child? She's cooking for you. Do you fucking see this? And like, seriously, y'all. Man can't even like, you know, God. I know that there's going to be people who are yelling at me about my assertion that most fathers are trash. But the fact of the matter is, child rearing and domestic responsibilities have been foisted off on women forever. And many men, when put in a position where they are meant to look after themselves, are already not doing super well. But when they are forced to look after children, they're fucking helpless. And you can see how low the bar is because there are fucking all kinds of statuses around Facebook and all kinds of memes that get shared. Look what an amazing dad he is. He learned to French braid. Like, how many women went into child rearing not knowing how to French braid, and they looked it up and they figured it out. And nobody gave them any fucking props because it's assumed that since she's a woman, she just knew how to do that. Since she's a woman, she just knows how to cook. Since she's a woman, she's inherently better at multitasking. Have you guys heard this one just like thrown around that women are just better at multitasking? Like, it is the most garbage pseudoscience shit ever. But people genuinely believe that women should be the domestic, like, head of household, except never really head of house, because they are just biologically better for that work, which is just so hysterical and insulting. And so, yeah, this guy, I would not be surprised if he didn't know how to make pancakes, to be perfectly honest. I wouldn't be surprised if he couldn't do this. And Rebecca's already out here kind of taking care of him. There's just a lot about that really like rings true for me. Erica says, reminds me of the joke, a male feminist walks into a bar because it was so low. Yep, I am a member of a Facebook group called The Bar for Men is So Low It's a Tavern in Hades, which I think is just the most beautiful, genius pun name ever. But yeah, the number of men that we see having no understanding of basic shit in their kids' lives, who their teachers are, what after-school activities they're involved in, and what time those take place, and the kind of equipment that you need. Whether you need to do, like, packed lunches. Most dudes just shove money in their kids' hands, and they're like, you figure it out. You know, there's no concern about nutrition there. There's also, I'm going to buy pizza. I am going to get macaroni and cheese. We're taking you to McDonald's for dinner. There is so little effort being put forth. It's like, just, I want you fed. But in terms of whether or not this is good for them, whether or not it shows to them that you actually like care about them, it is not relevant at all. That is the standard. I mean, when my mother and my father split up, you should have seen the number of plastic containers that began to pile up in his cupboard because he got Chinese takeout every single night. Like, and it was all in those like little sort of reusable black plastic container with a clear lid. And there was a fucking cupboard full because he knew how to cook like 2 things. And granted, those 2 things he cooked, they were fucking delicious. But those were the only 2 things that he knew how to cook. And he was not interested in learning how to cook. And this is the thing. We are treated as if we know this stuff from birth. Like we were born doing it. Or, well, you were taught as a kid. And since you learned it as a child, that means that you're just like better at it than I would be if I tried to learn now. Absolutely not. Look, I have, granted, been baking and cooking since I was a kid, but I didn't get really good cooking skills until the last, like, probably 8 years of my life. Before that, it was just very basic shit. And I learned. I read and watched and talked to people who cooked, dated a chef for a while, and it's kind of funny to me that men have no problems with cooking when it's like, you know, going out into the professional world and making your living as a chef in a restaurant. But when it comes to like being at home and cooking, this is looked down upon. Men are able to monetize their skill and use this as a means of being a breadwinner. And I think there's also what goes along with the respect of being a chef is that if you are a head chef in a kitchen, you have a team of people working under you. So it's, again, like a power thing versus being in a kitchen all by yourself with nobody to fucking applaud you for it. So, yeah, it's just... And her mother in that scene, first of all, I don't know what the CGI was to make her look younger, but it was a little bit freaky, but also it kind of worked for me. Just being like, dude, are you serious? And he tries to say something about how as soon as I get settled, I'll send... And it's just like, no, you won't. You won't, though. You know that you're not going to, like... The whole conversation is so typical and so, like... something that I think so many people will know exactly where this dude is coming from. They're going to have met this guy. Either he was their father or their husband. When I'm really settled down, I'll come and see her. And she says, right. And he says, I'll figure out a plan. I want to. She's a cute kid. And she turns around. She's not a kid. She's your daughter. Like, what the fuck? And he says, I just can't have anyone holding me back right now. And then, please don't tell her. She wouldn't understand. Now listen. There are plenty of things when you say, don't tell the children, that it is valid. Kids don't need to know this shit. But this is one of those moments where he knows what he's asking her to do. This isn't just, we can't let them know we're having money problems. The kids don't need to know, we'll figure something out. We can't let them know that their aunt is sick. She might be okay. If things get worse, we'll tell them. But right now, we don't need to worry them. This isn't that. This is him saying, don't tell her, I don't want her here. You be the bad guy. He's straight up telling her that's what he wants to avoid, is to be the bad guy. He is a coward. He is a piece of actual shit. And I, for one, hope that Rebecca, later in this show, that he comes up and she gets to fucking, like, let him have it a little bit. I don't know if that's, like, useful. I don't know if that'll be good for her or not. But, like, I genuinely want this guy to be ripped apart. It's so gross to me that men feel free to walk away in situations like this and leave their ex-wives / girlfriends holding the bag. And I bet if he were in a slightly different situation, he would even be trying to get away with, like, not paying child support and shit. Owen is the manager of his family's business, and they have this thing now where people who come and work for them, frequently they are job hoppers. And they will see that after a couple of months working with them, some guy is starting to get his paycheck garnished for child support payments because the IRS will catch up to you. And as soon as they see that those garnishments are going through, they put out an ad to fill that position. Because every time that those guys have to start paying child support, they quit the job and then they move on to something else so that they can earn without being caught for a few months. So these people change jobs every few months purely to get away with not contributing to the welfare of the child that they created. And it is so standard that, like, they just, without even having to think about it, start interviewing other people. And I was talking with another friend who's a manager and, like, works with the hiring manager, and they said the exact same thing. When somebody is getting garnished, they start looking for people to fill a position because guys always bail. So disgusting. Like, you know, and y'all want to know why we want abortion on the fucking table as an option? Because we are the ones that wind up fucking holding the bag. And the bag is a baby. Correct. So, this scene just, made me so mad. So, then we have, back at her apartment, things begin to unravel. Paula is trying to just enjoy herself, her time alone. And all of a sudden, she hears a knocking at the door. And it's Josh. And she is mystified. Because this entire time, Paula has been laboring under the delusion that Rebecca has flown off to Hawaii for her grand gesture that she is going to make to get Josh back. And that they are going to have this amazing time in this tropical paradise, living out the first hours / days of a relationship together. And the fact that Rebecca has not texted her back, she just sort of takes as, if anything, a good sign that Rebecca is so busy that she doesn't have time to keep Paula updated on everything. But the truth is, Rebecca just fucking ran. She just wanted to go to Hawaii because she needed to get away from her life. And when Josh turns up, Paula realizes that she just has no idea what's going on. And it really quickly begins to snowball. Daryl shows up also wanting to know where Rebecca is. And I think that it's Josh that gets in touch with Greg, if I'm not mistaken. So Greg turns up and is like, what are you talking about that Rebecca is missing? And all of them are brainstorming where she could be. There's a really sort of funny moment where Josh is saying that he's been texting her for days and she's not getting back to him. And Paula is like, what are you texting her about? And he says, it's none of your business. And she's like, oh my God, are you kidding me? And she lists everything that has happened over the past couple days and then realizes, oh my God, that's what it is. You and Valencia are staying together, aren't you? Oh my God. And she starts to understand probably what happened is that Rebecca had a bit of a breakdown, realizing that even after having kissed, that wasn't going to be enough. But she doesn't know still where exactly Rebecca could be. So as they all begin to spiral and Greg is the only one who's really being both feet on the ground here. He says something about how what are we going to do? Call the cops and tell them that somebody who's notorious for kind of impulsive behavior has been missing for less than a day? And they all are sort of yeah, well, and this leads to Paula going into Rebecca's computer. She has her password. And there's a weird line where as she begins to go into Rebecca's computer, everybody behind her is like, whoa, that's not cool. And she says to Daryl, oh, really? Your friends don't have all your passwords? I'm not sure I'd call them friends then, Daryl. Now, this is one of those things that I have mixed feelings on because I think it's pretty clear that Paula is in an unhealthy place when it comes to her wanting to live vicariously through Rebecca, because she says something about Rebecca tells me everything. I can't believe that she would just leave and not say to me of all people. And Greg says something like, well, I mean, no disrespect, but you haven't known Rebecca that long. And she gets mad and is like, dude, you know what? No. And she says, so first of all, there's that aspect of her. He's not wrong. She hasn't known him that long. But then she says, just because you're super hot. And there is a whole thing later where Rebecca is talking to her therapist and she calls him hot as well. And Rebecca's like, what? And apparently he is very appealing to an older group of women above the age of 45, I think she said, something like that. Which is just so funny. What a weird little side bit to do. But I really enjoyed that. Yeah, I also really like that Josh asks Daryl, is Greg super hot? And Daryl says, if you like angry, sure. Because first of all, that means that Josh is aware that Daryl is bi and is consulting him I don't really get it, but is that a thing? So I like that he's doing that. And I love the fact that Daryl's well, not for me, but I can see it because he's so angry all the time. He's just, of course he's not going to be Daryl's type. That's not the kind that Daryl goes for. But Greg, his comment to Paula about her not knowing Rebecca that long, it's not incorrect. And it's an interesting thing to be pointed out that I feel like this show is low-key prepping us for there to be a conversation about Paula being as invested in everything as she has been and pushing Rebecca to do things that are not healthy for the sake of the story overall. She's wanting Rebecca to fulfill this role of being in a rom-com when this is her actual life. And I said this last episode that I was beginning to be alarmed by it. And I feel like we're heading in the direction where the show is going to kind of address that. But yeah, so she goes into Rebecca's emails and she realizes that Rebecca has like gotten her old job in New York. She's gotten an offer from them to come back. That she is looking at apartments, that she already bought a plane ticket. Like, Rebecca is setting up to leave. And Josh says something about how Rebecca's just being dramatic, which, don't get me started on the guys calling women just being dramatic ever, because the thing is that Rebecca can just be dramatic, but I hate that he says that. But the thing is, she can't be just being dramatic. She hasn't told anybody about this. If she were being dramatic, part of the drama is telling other people and spreading the news and getting everyone around you going, oh my God, no, don't leave. That's the drama. There's no drama to secretly doing all of this behind everybody's back. Unless the drama was meant to be, I'm just going to vanish and go back to my old life and not say goodbye to any of you, which I don't see that happening. And Paula, for her part, is floored. Like, the fact that Rebecca was not only even thinking about going back to New York, but that she was making concrete plans is, and did not tell her about it, did not even float to her, you know what, I'm thinking, what if I just left? It is unthinkable to her. You know, she's, I think it's like, Greg says something about like, well, you know, it's not like she died. Thank God she's not dead. And Paula says it's worse. She's leaving us. So, and it turns out when he says, thank God she's not dead, we find out that he had been out here calling a bunch of hospitals and morgues trying to see if Rebecca had turned up in any of them, because he was a lot more worried than he was letting on. He was trying to keep a level head, but also, you know, being prepared for the worst in a lot of ways. So let's talk about Josh real quick here. He comes running to Rebecca's house. After the last scene we saw with him and Valencia is him sitting next to her as she poo-poos every idea that he has for what to eat for dinner, and tells him that he's going to be the one that goes out and picks it up because delivery will take too long. He has this miserable look of, oh my God, I've made a huge mistake on his face. And then the next thing we know, he's turning up at Rebecca's front door, desperate to know where she is because he's been texting her a ton and she's not answering. Interesting. What's he texting? I really wish that Paula had gotten the chance to push him on this a little bit more. Because here's what I think we're going to get. And I love this. If this is what happens, I'm going to be delighted. I think we're going to get Josh kind of realizing, like, oh my God, no, I really like Rebecca. I do think I'm prepared to risk leaving Valencia if she is. And I think Rebecca, after the various epiphanies that she has had with the dream ghost, is going to be like, look, if you had told me this like a few days ago, I would have just been so happy. But at this point, I feel like that's a bad plan. Because when she comes in, after her flight lands, it turns out, she gets back on the plane, or she turns around, gets back on another plane, and comes home. I think she is realizing how unhealthy some of her patterns have been. I think she's realizing how much she has predicated her own happiness on what other people think of her and how they react to her. And I think she's just going to realize that it's time for her to change some things about the way that she's living her life. And while there might be a big part of her that is still into Josh, I have been saying that I'm not entirely sure I buy that she even is in love with him the way that she keeps claiming. It feels like he's way more of a symbol to her of something that she thought she had that she wants back. But the truth is she never really had it. Like, we saw what it was like between the two of them back in the day. Without her rose-colored glasses on the situation, looking at the genuine interaction between her and Josh, their relationship wasn't awesome. He was unhappy. She was very pushy and needy. They might do better now as adults, but I don't know that she is going to be interested in pursuing that the way that she was, where it was like in her mind, this like fucking trophy out on a pedestal waiting for her at the end of an obstacle course. And she was just looking at it like, if I get that, everything's fine. I will be happy, you know? I feel like she's starting to realize she has been hanging her hopes for a life that is happy purely on another person. And that is not a sustainable thing. And it's a really awful, like, because there's such a fine line between wanting to be happy and recognizing that another person is a big part of that, and wanting to be happy and believing that another person is the answer, you know? Like, because when I'm here saying, like, she has to understand that he isn't the answer and the thing that will make her happy. But I say that, and, like, I left my husband for someone else and am now happier than I have ever been. This man is everything to me. And I am so much happier now. But also, a lot else in my life has changed. And the thing is, like, would this all else have changed if not for him? I don't know. I think so, but, like, I don't know. So I hesitate to be, like, too judgmental or make too huge a declaration, because, like, trying to behave as if you don't need a significant other to be happy is a really easy thing to say when you have found somebody that you're happy with. And I don't think it's fair to discount how valuable it is to have somebody who cares about you in your life. I mean, there have been a lot of moments over the past few years that if Owen wasn't there, ready to catch me as I completely lost my mind, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know where I would be now. So I don't like to be like, oh, it doesn't matter. You need to love yourself first. You need to put yourself first. I just, like, it's so easy to, like, say that in theory, and it's not that simple, you know? But at the same time, I don't put Josh in the category of, like, true love and somebody who will really be there for you, because I don't know enough about Josh in that sort of situation. We have seen him with Valencia, but we have only ever really seen the two of them like being really physically into each other, just being super attracted to each other, and, you know, and also both really liking to work out. And these are the things we've seen them, like, see eye to eye on. And then other than that, it's just been a lot of bickering. A lot of him wanting one thing and her not really understanding why he wants it. A lot of her putting the focus on him, like, earning a certain amount of money and not being willing to, like, see what could be important to him outside of income. So in terms of, you know, Valencia having a meltdown over something and how Josh responds to that and how supportive he is, I really don't know. I feel like, weirdly, as much as we want to see Valencia as sort of the villain, she does seem to have been the one that's, like, spearheading the stability of their relationship. There isn't much about Josh that feels grown up, responsible, or like the kind of person that I think Rebecca sort of needs. At the same time, Rebecca's out here making pancakes for her dad. So maybe that's just who she is, and having somebody who's a lot more spontaneous, a lot more fun-loving is what she needs. But I'm speaking as somebody who I have always been the linchpin. I always wind up being the person who's like, out of the couple, I'm in charge of like paying the bills. I'm in charge of anything that has to do with like, going grocery shopping, all of the domestic household nuts and bolts. I've always been the one that wound up doing it because I am that type. And it gets really tiring to feel like that's all on you all the time. So there's a part of me that feels like probably Rebecca could do okay with somebody like Josh, but I feel like it would be really nice if she wasn't going into a relationship with somebody who off the bat, I feel like, is not even really capable of doing the things that she needs. It's not just, oh, well, you know what? I enjoy this and I prefer doing this, so I will do this. It's, well, I'm going to have to do this because, like, if I don't do it, it's not getting done. That's a shit place to be. I have been there a lot. And she and I do have a lot of similarities in some parts of our personality. Also, there's this whole, like, other sub-story about her getting into a really terrible sounding play, Moby Dick the Musical, which, guys, is this real? Is this a real thing? Because it sounds fake, but there are so many musicals out there that I can't believe are real, that I just, like, I don't trust my judgment on this anymore. And she's out here fucking having the time of her life with this show. But because this dude who is like the one in charge, it's his show in college, guys, he is a really like fucking on the nose pretentious theater student. Holy shit. I have met this dude like many times. Because things go left with him and it turns out that he has been seeing somebody else, she drops out, and her therapist is pointing out, you decided to like give up on something that you loved and you were passionate about, all because of a dude. And passion is its own kind of love. You should not have given up on that. And I'm wondering if she's going to revisit that, if she's going to be in LA, like trying to tap into, or West Covina, trying to tap into like the community theater scene in order to get some of that passion back. Cause yeah, I mean, I remember there was an audition in high school, for Grease, which we were doing. And like, I really thought I would be able to be Rizzo. I really thought I would get it. And the day of the auditions, me and my boyfriend got in a horrific fight right before I went up to do my audition. And I was fighting with him rather than reading the script and understanding what the script was. And there's a lot of weird differences between the movie and the script. So I didn't get the intonation that I should have for some of the lines. Basically, this fight caused me to completely fuck up my audition, and I didn't even get like a named part. And I think back and just get so angry at myself that I let this stupid nothing boyfriend, who was just such a fucking liar and just a bad person, ruin. And it's not like I love Grease, but I loved performing, and I let him get under my skin and ruin this like moment that I had to prove myself. And it resulted in me having this like background role that I didn't really get to do all that much. And I was sort of bored because the previous year I had had a lead role. And so I was just backstage hanging out, getting involved in drama over and over again, rather than performing, working on lines, being like involved. And it's sort of like, in the end, I now know musical theater wasn't for me, but it was one of those moments of like, why did I let this other thing that really should not be a priority get in the way of something that I really cared about? And life just turns out to be a series of choices like this, where you have to decide what actually matters here. And unfortunately, when we're younger, a lot of the time we put more weight on things that in the end turn out to be very unimportant because we have a skewed sense of perspective. We haven't lived long enough to know that this is going to be laughable to you in 5 years. Like, she's trying to say that to those girls when they go to the camp. Like, you won't even remember this guy. I mean, that's true. But in the moment, it feels huge to you. And how do you, like, repair the damage from those choices, you know? I'm hoping that she does. So, yeah, she comes home to everybody, like, sitting around wondering what had happened to you. And I really like that Greg says, welcome back, bunch, and tries to just leave. And she gives him a hug and tells him, thank you for being here. And it's a moment for him of him, like, it's obvious that he's trying so hard to not be weird, but it gets to him a bit, I think, that she hugged him like that. Like, he just doesn't want to feel what he's feeling, so he's very reserved and pulls back. And immediately is like, see you later, suckers, because that's how he is. But yeah, you can see on his face that he's kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? Of course, Daryl gives her a hug, tells her, please don't leave me ever again. It hurts my heart. And he then, like, waves his hand and walks away before he can, like, start crying. And it's, like, the cutest thing in the entire world. She asks Paula, why are you wearing my bathrobe? And I feel like this is a really good question. I didn't get a chance to talk about this as much, but living vicariously through Rebecca, I mean, she's wearing her clothes. Now, granted, it's a robe. It's not clothes. She's not wearing Rebecca's clothes. It's still, there's a vibe, you know? And then she looks up at Josh, who is looking through all of the photos that she got back from the developer of the two of them together. And she turns and stares at him, and he says, what's up with all of this? What are all of these? Why do you have them? And he says, Rebecca, are you in love with me? And then there's this long pause of her staring at him, and we cut. And then it goes to her seeing an alien play with her magical dream ghost therapist, which is a pretty good ending. I do really love the line delivery when she sees that Josh is holding her pictures and she's like, I see my pictures have arrived. Like, the way that she says it is very good. So yeah, I am dying to know what this conversation's going to look like. I really just, who knows? All right, guys. Well, thank you all so much for listening. Thank you very much to Emery again for commissioning this episode. I hope that y'all have been enjoying the show, and I will see you soon with a new one. So until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.